Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's free webinar, which is 5 must-dos to start sales momentum with Michael Hess from Core 6 Management Advisors and Gadiel Morantes from Early Growth Financial Services. My name is Erica Malsberg, and I'm going to be the moderator today. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Early Growth Financial Services, and I will be fielding all your questions and interjecting them so you get your questions answered. The presentation is going to run about 40 minutes. If you do have questions, don't just raise your hand. Just go ahead and enter them into that chat field, and we'll try and get to them as we go along. You can also tweet questions to us at Early Growth FS with the hashtag StartupSales. If we don't get time to answer your questions during this presentation, we will provide our contact information at the end of the deck, so you can follow up with us individually. And you'll also receive an email tomorrow that's going to have a link to the deck and the recording, so you'll have that information at your fingertips. So today I am very pleased to introduce our presenters. First we have with us Michael Hess. And Michael is the founder principal for Core 6 Management Advisors, which is passionately dedicated to helping fast-growth companies build high-performing sales operations. Michael's a sales and management veteran who's proven experience building and motivating sales teams and developing skills of key sales personnel, including executives, managers, and individual contributors. For almost 3 decades, Michael has held executive management positions for B2B companies focused on solution-oriented selling to Fortune 500 customers. Michael has also worked as a senior executive in both legacy media, like Esquire, Rolling Stone, and The New Yorker, and has launched digital startups like WebRep, Room 12, Toucan Media, Video Egg, and Rebel Mouse. So good afternoon, and welcome to you, Michael.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We also have with us today Gadiel Morantes, who's our Chief Revenue Officer for Early Growth Financial Services. Gadiel's an accomplished executive with 15-plus years experience. His vast experience working with founders and as an entrepreneur himself has given him great insight into what it takes to build successful companies. So hello and welcome to you, Gadiel.
Hi, Erica and Michael. Thank you.
Of course. So before we jump in and I hand this off to Michael, do you want to just say a few words about Early Growth Financial Services, Gadiel?
Absolutely, be happy to. First off, thank you for all the attendees that we have. I think we're really excited to have Michael speak with us today and share his knowledge around the sales process and the 5 key essentials. So a little background about Early Growth Financial Services. We're an outsourced accounting firm. We've been around for a little over 7 years at this point. The services we offer kind of fall into 4 different categories: tax return preparation, filing, tax consulting, 409A valuation services, with the core business really being the day-to-day transactional accounting on an outsourced hourly basis, as well as our CFO consulting services, which include things like building financial projections and models and really helping companies grow and scale their business. We are headquartered in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and have 7 other locations throughout the U.S. LA, Seattle, Las Vegas, Boulder, Austin, Chicago, and New York. So we have a footprint in each of those locations and have about 28 CFOs on staff. And I head up our business development team, and we aggressively go out and work with a lot of early stage and mid-sized companies that are really looking for the opportunity to grow and scale their business. And so putting events like this and webinars like this and partnering with good folks like Michael really help our client base as well as other companies out there. So we're thrilled to have them.
Great, thanks so much. So with that said, I'm going to actually hand this off to Michael to jump in because we have a lot of material to cover today. So all yours, Michael.
Wonderful. Did that important technological switch happen? Are you looking at my screen?
I think I'm seeing your screen. I think we're good to go.
All right,
it looks
good.
great.
All right, fantastic. So I just have to take care of the little GoToWebinar panel here, and I'll get rid of that, and we're set to go. And I do want to say thank you again for hosting me. And I'm very excited to join here because it is a very important subject that we're going to talk about. Because, of course, as we know, money makes the world go round. And if you're not going to be focused on driving revenue at any stage of the company life that you are in, then you really are missing the boat on how to develop midterm and long-term goals. I do want to say, though, that hats off to both Erica and Gadiel for pushing me very hard to sculpt what we think is a really good presentation today. We prepared for this for many weeks. We've gone back and forth, and they have taken great care to push and challenge me to design something that you're going to see that we think addresses some of your issues. Having said that, we know that there's going to be a lot of topics here and a lot of subjects that you're going to probably say, get it, got it, doing it. Get it, got it, doing it, right? Okay? Because this is obviously not the first time that you've heard somebody talk about revenue driving, best practices, etc. What we hope for is to develop some sort of a back and forth conversation, because this time really is about your desire and your needs and less about the importance of me plugging my company or plugging some of the experience that I've learned in my 3 decades. So that is to say that you can always interrupt, ask a question, and feel free to challenge me and or ask for how it might pertain to some situations that you are facing. Again, we did our best with our best presumption on what we think is relevant, and we broke it into 2 parts, which is what you're looking at right here. Today, what you have to think about today to really build that momentum. And then it is important to look at, what does tomorrow look like? And after the initial phases of driving some protocol and process that get you to that very important point where you can think about a more sophisticated revenue operation, what are some of those things that you're going to have to think about? I would say of these 2 agenda items, the first one is maybe 65% of our content, with maybe a third being the tomorrow quotient. So let's dive in, if that's okay with everybody, and we'll see what we can learn here. So right away, from 0 to 60, 5 easy steps, and of course, taking a page out of what works in most media business. And again, I'll just comment that that has been my domain industry for nearly 30 years, but yet I will say that the things that I've studied regarding sales, sales management, revenue driving, protocol, etc., are rooted in fundamental issues that apply to any industry. But for the most part, again, taking a page out of the media book, we call these things 5 easy steps. We call them listicles. You see it all over the magazine business. You see it all over the web. You can shed weight in 4 quick steps. You can do this in 7 easy stages, right? Got to make it simple. I think these are 5 things that are quickly things that you can do to drive revenue and get organized about how your organization attacks your revenue. So let's look. What are they? Number 1, create a compelling general presentation. Number 2, prioritize and assign accounts. Number 3, understand your obstacles and the handling techniques that are assigned to those obstacles. Number 4, develop a sales process and pipeline management tools. And number 5, agree on pricing and rules. We're going to dive into each one of these separately and individually in a moment. I want that to resonate right there. And again, you're probably looking at this and you're saying, do it, not doing it as well as I could, need help on that, doing that, what have you. That's what this session is about. Hopefully to stimulate some ideas, hopefully to give you a conversation tool here to make it relevant for you so that you can, again, get some traction in your organization. I thought it would be fun, however, to complete this list, because one of the great things I get to do as an advisory company is I get to think of all the numerous factors and or influences that go into something. It's not just these 5 things that you have to think about when you're driving revenue, and oftentimes it helps when we see the broad context of what drives the 5 top things that you have to do right away. So I thought we could look at 6 through 9. After you're mastering 1 through 5, it's really important for you to understand your competition. Number 7, create a defendable, unique value proposition. Number 8, establish a recruitment process. Number 9, create sales support tools and systems. Again, each of these are really crucial, but they're just probably not the most important things you have to think about right away. Yet some of your work in 1 through 5 does eventually touch some of these things. So don't just look at this as we go from 6 through 9 in a linear way and say, I'm going to do this according to the calendar. Once I've perfected 1 through 5, the next month is about number 6, then it's about 7, 8, 9. Doesn't work that way. There's more. 10 through 15, full enchiladas I call it, installing a strategic account review system. Number 11, developing a sales comp plan that reinforces the desired behaviors that you need with everybody on your team. Number 12, activating a performance review process for each rep and each manager. Number 13, creating a sales culture ethos, but yet tying it to performance reviews. A lot of companies don't do that. They just say, hey, here's a ping pong table. We got Thirsty Thursdays, and we're going to have a culture. It's not that. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about creating a sales culture. Number 14, developing skill development curriculum and a routine. And number 15, assessing the executive team collaboration with the sales leadership. How do those functions work together to create value? That shows you that there's a lot of detail that goes into the design of a sales operation, the execution that's needed. But yet, again, you've probably all been exposed to these things because this is probably not the first company that you've managed or been an executive at or founded, etc. So you're familiar with this, but I did want to show the complete context of what I think are kind of the essential steps to think about over the development of a really finely tuned revenue operation. So let me pause right there, see if Gadiel wants to corner me on anything and or any other questions, and then we'll move on. I'll just stay silent for a moment.
No, I think that's perfect, and I think you're outlining a bunch of really key elements on growing and building a sales organization. And I know from my own experience of doing much of this within early growth financial services that a lot of these key items are things that you're going to have to tackle, and doing that sooner than later will help you build that foundation moving forward. So I think that's what makes this presentation particularly relevant for companies that are in the very early stages of growing their business and really trying to generate that sales traction. So that's what I'm thinking as I'm kind of listening in and building on this.
Good. And I'm sorry, Erica, should I be pausing? Are the questions going to be coming in real time? Are they coming in chat for you? Tell me what the protocol is again there.
Sure, yeah. The questions will be coming in as people ask them. I think once you start digging into some of these topics, folks, as you're listening, when, we're going to flip to the next slide, start talking about general presentations and move on from there. So if you have any questions, let us know, and I'll just jump in and ask Michael.
Perfect. All right, so let's break down the top 5. Creating a strong general presentation. What does this mean? All right, well, pick your tool, PowerPoint or Keynote. All right, that's great. That's pretty basic. Including short videos. Okay, why? Very simple. People like full, they like action. Short, though. Keep them short. Keynote is really strong for embedding videos. PowerPoint has gotten better of late, but you got to have a tool, okay? It's got to be aesthetic. It's got to be pleasing to the eye. It's got to have some sort of an aesthetic tone to it that respects that your buyer is looking at you and your brand and making decisions about how trustworthy and how credible you are. And yes, making judgments even down to the point of, how does your deck look? My deck here, as you can see, is very clean. I'm not littering it with a lot of trite or cliche influences, because right now the most important thing is the information I'm sharing with you. And there aren't any images that are going to really enhance this with most of the stuff I'm talking about. Your propositions, however, are probably different. Third bullet point, make it to the point, make it professional. When I say 5 minutes max, would you believe, this is shocking, Gadiel. I don't know if you know this stat. I just read this before we came on board. The attention span of a buyer these days is now less than a fly. I just read it. Check it out. Yep,
that's scary. That is scary. So I should abbreviate my pitches to 15 seconds and be done, right?
Pretty much. Okay, so when we're talking about a general presentation, though, because again, you got to get things out there. You got to talk about your value proposition. You got to talk about who you are, where you're from, etc. But make it brief. You don't have to create 17 million slides. If you're a SaaS business, if you're selling some technology, make your platform demo real quick as well. There should also be a strategy for you to deliver over the phone versus in person. Very different communication methods are used versus with either of those modes. So make sure that the organization is really kind of understands how to deliver a unified pitch that's appropriate for either of those modes. The last bullet point, so crucial, and I've spent 25 years teaching presentation skills to my sales teams, which have ranged from one person all the way up to 150 people. And that is, if you don't practice, then you're not going to gain a very high quality skill in designing, or excuse me, in presenting your material. Because really when you're talking about a general presentation, you're talking about storytelling. Everybody likes a story. I love it when somebody reads a story to me. You love it when somebody puts things and frames things in such a way where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's conflict resolution. That really is what we're talking about when we're talking about a general presentation. We're talking not about who, what, when, where, how. We're talking about how do you tell a story? What is the narrative of your brand and or your product and service that gets people excited? That's why we put in videos. That's why it's got to be aesthetic. That's why you need somebody who knows what they're doing to design something that is really, really appealing, and that's why it's got to be brief. Because stories don't need to go on and on and on. They need to be tight. There's got to be an ending. Okay? So for the most part, I think all these things are important when we're talking about a GP, as I refer to it. And you probably are doing some of these things, to which I'd say, congratulations. I would challenge you all, and I would say, does everybody in your organization have the same messaging discipline? And what I'm referring to is, are you saying the same things? Are you enhancing and hitting on and stressing on the right things? Or do you have some people who are burying the lead, which is a journalistic phrase, of course, right? Burying the headline. Like, tell me what I'm supposed to know and do it in an eloquent, articulate way with enthusiasm, but make sure everybody in the organization has that script and knows what they're saying and is saying the same thing. All right. Can we move on, Gadiel?
Well, I just want to touch on that last point. That's key, because the message you want to project to the buyer has to be consistent from, the operations of your staff, anybody who's client-facing in any way. That's a hugely important point, and I completely agree with you on that.
And as it applies to some of our listeners here, it's probably relevant when we're talking about smaller organizations where everybody is in sales. Everybody is responsible for some form of revenue generation at an early stage in a business. Certainly when you get up to some of the sizes of the organizations I've built and been a part of, where I have offices in London and Australia, etc., you want quality control issues to be governing your presentation strategy and your selling strategy for different reasons. But at an early stage, the way people talk and the way people think are different. VP of Engineering talks different than the CEO. CEOs talk and think differently than the guy who's running finance, your finance manager, versus the one salesperson that you may have who might be your best friend's nephew. Okay? Key to have everybody agreeing on what the messaging is to be consistent.
So before we move on, Michael, we have a question here from Gene in the audience, and he was asking if you could speak a little bit to the differences about presenting your deck live versus on the phone.
Excellent. So thanks, Gene, and thanks, Erica. So the number one difference is that on the phone, you have to be far more articulate and specific about what you want the person to look at, because you don't have control physically over what they're doing. They may be looking at their Twitter account on their phone and not at the screen if we're doing a screen share right now. So for example, right now I can't guarantee that any of you are listening and looking at the things that I'm referring to on these slides. You could be distracted with something. You could be checking on an email. You could be doing something over here. So you have to, number one, go a little bit beyond, make a little bit more effort when you're on the phone to get the buy-in with that one person. Now this is different. It's Gadiel and myself and Erica presenting to, I don't know, 60 some odd people. But when it's one-on-one over the phone, you need to make sure there's checkpoints throughout the conversation so that that person is engaged. Versus when you're physically presenting to somebody, you don't need to have that checkpoint because you can see with your eyes. So think about the logical nature of what you are like when someone presents to you over the phone. And what are the things that keep you engaged, and what are the things that are really important is how they engage you and how they use their tools. And I would also probably say that many of the slides in a general presentation are probably designed more for an aesthetic face-to-face effect, and some of that is lost on the actual phone delivery. So you should go through the presentation even faster on the phone. Because on the phone, it's more about the conversation that can be generated after the presentation. I'm not saying that's not important in your face-to-face. And the important thing about a general presentation is, and this is a key, and gosh, now I'm thinking that I should have included this. The general presentation is not the selling tool. The general presentation is an advancement and credibility tool. The selling occurs after you end the presentation and say, so tell me, Gadiel, what here that I showed you resonates most with you? And therefore, that's when the selling starts, when you can probe on what the customer really cares about. On the phone, because you don't have that physical contact, you just need to go a little faster to get to the conversation. How's that? Good?
I think that's great. Yeah, I'm concerned. We have so much content still to get to. So yeah, let's go on to point two.
Number two, you're right. Okay, number two. Prioritize and assign accounts. Divide and conquer. Take time to develop a list. Start small and expand when ready. For example, the Fortune 500 is probably not a reasonable starting point. So if anybody in your organization says, hey, I think we should just call on the Fortune 500, let's iron it down a little bit. Let's nail it a little closer. Align strengths and knowledge. Triangulation is a sales term that refers to who knows who inside of the organization. Who does the CFO know? Who's the head of engineering know? Guess what? Those people now have got to set up meetings with those folks. So again, prioritizing where you're going to start. 4, tabulate good records per each account, begin to develop your CRM system. This is a massive problem with most companies that they don't adhere to. They don't get that you got to start keeping data and records day one with your sales efforts. What type of a customer did you call on? What did they think about your product or your offering? How did they respond? What were the questions they asked? What are the obstacles? Because you're moving so fast and you're working so hard. Many of you are probably working through the weekends and at night, etc. If you don't take time to register some of the data and the information, you may wake up 3 months down the line and say, geez, I've been selling for 3 months or 4 months, and I haven't learned anything. Or more dangerous is you're liable to make poor decisions because you haven't, in a logical, quiet moment, registered some of the data, thus allowing you later on to look at it and say, wow, look at some of these trends. These types of companies, these types of customers aren't buying what we're selling, or they're not buying this feature that we thought would work. So really important at the start to really get a strategy about prioritizing and assigning your accounts. And this is pretty basic stuff, but again, if you can take one nugget, then that's good.
And on here, I would comment that one of the struggles or one of the challenges we had as an organization was implementing a CRM tracking mechanism a little bit later in the process, and so that can become a challenge, and just tracking your opportunities and tracking who you've spoken to and who you can go back to and revisit can be important. So you mentioned, the Google Docs working fine to start. I completely agree with that, but there are some really excellent options that are relatively inexpensive that you can implement from the start and start building processes around that piece of it on the sales side.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's this one called Zoho. I think it's free up to a certain number of seats. Not everything has to be run by Salesforce.com. So, yeah, the point is start early because, as you said, Gadiel, implementing later, it's a mess. It's a mess. Okay. Number 3, understand your obstacles. Start a list of what the prospects are saying. This is selling, everybody. Selling is getting through obstacles, right? This is what it's about. Selling is not presenting a GP. Selling is not answering an RFP, which stands for Request for Proposal. Many of you know that. Selling is handling obstacles. Number 2, define and separate obstacles from questions. Prospects ask a lot of questions, and they're not all obstacles. It's a very sophisticated technique to decipher that, but it can be learned very, very quickly. Of course, it's really great to just have a lot of sales calls and interactions with customers because nobody's going to train you more than buyers and prospects. Number 3, share obstacles with everybody on the executive team and the product team and get a discussion going regarding the solutions that could come. Number 4, learn how to qualify an obstacle and apply to your sales interaction. Gadiel, how important is that feature to your decision on contracting with us? That's a very direct question. Gadiel has to answer. Well, it's not that important. Great. I need to know that before I leave the meeting because then my proposal or what I talk to you, Gadiel, with later on won't necessarily focus on that. You got to understand what the buyer cares about. Rinse, repeat. Finally, learn your obstacles. Learn how to qualify, present to your key internal constituents so that they can help, and discuss your solutions. This is a really important one here, the last line, present to key internal constituents. Nobody in any organization should be bashful or coy about bringing these obstacles to the forefront to discuss. And if you're a COO or a CEO, you have to be open-minded to hear this. Whether your salesperson is, again, your best friend's nephew, or you start to develop numerous salespeople, you have to be open to what the obstacles are in the whole process because this is the key to eventually making it through to driving revenue in a sustainable manner.
I think a lot of folks really focus on the value proposition, which is hugely important, but that's where your point about the obstacles, overcoming those hurdles and those obstacles, and having those not templated responses, but just understanding what the responses are can really help drive the sales process forward, which is what you want at the end of the day. As we all know, we all think that our companies are great and our product is awesome, but understanding where there may be some gaps, and it's okay to have gaps. It's just understanding that there is a gap and understanding how you overcome that piece of it is something that will help folks bring that process forward.
Yeah, exactly. And you know this, Gadiel, because you and I are dealing with the same constituents, and those are the nice folks who've decided to join us today. And the fact is that at the early stage of a company or a startup stage, however you define it, the number one enemy is time. It's not the competitor, it's time. And the only way to beat time, if you can, I don't know if that's possible, but the only way to combat it is to qualify those prospects each and every time to find out, are they a buyer? If so, when? If they're not a buyer, why not? Basic questions, that's got to drive your obstacle process, and that helps you tame the time problem. Okay, number 4, develop process and revenue management tools. So you're starting to see some consistency here in that there's got to be some organization and there's got to be a protocol when you're driving revenue. You can't just do it willy-nilly and seat of the pants. First bullet point here, establish and follow a sales process. Contact, okay, so this is actually the process here. You're contacting somebody, you're finding out if there's a desire there. Is there a phone meeting that's necessary? Is there a personal meeting that's necessary? You always want to try to get a personal meeting because that's obviously the most amount of information and influence you can exert is through a face-to-face meeting. Do you need additional meetings? what is this process? How does the company follow up? What is your process for qualifying your obstacles and then closing and negotiating? So it sounds pretty complex, but just it's important to sit down and make sure that everybody who is in sales and driving revenue understands that there is a process. Help the organization understand the process and share best practices, create baseline marketing collateral to help tell the story. I say baseline because I think sometimes I see early stage companies getting a little whacked out thinking that they need to, create a web page and a web section and a collateral piece for this and for that. Don't waste too much time doing that. You got to drive revenue. Don't worry about the marketing collateral later. Sales has to be done hand-to-hand combat. Go to see your customers. Don't worry about, having a full suite of collateral and marketing materials. Qualify your customers and begin establishing the CRM. So obviously you see there's a little crossover with number 3 in terms of the qualifying process, right? But the point here is the CRM, and it could be Excel. I mean, we talked about it. It could be Google Docs. But more importantly, again, the process, review it each week as a group and determine what your nexts are. So literally there's shared knowledge in the organization, and there's an ability for people to understand what this process looks like. The other reason why you want to establish process and sit down is because it does take numerous inputs and influences from the organization to share observations and insights to then perfect the process. So it is the time when you want a lot of chefs in the kitchen. All right, number 5, determining pricing strategy and rules. Yes, Erica?
I was gonna jump in real quick. Sorry, I have a question from Abby here. She's asking how important, in terms of marketing collateral, do you need actual printed pieces of marketing collateral, or what sort of pieces do you need to support your sales efforts?
I think it really is entirely based on your prospect. If your prospect are, don't laugh, but let's call them Main Street USA retailers, then they're probably not that digital savvy, and you do need something to hand to them. If your prospect is very digitally savvy, or that's even their business and they live online, then you don't need anything printed. So I think it really comes down to what your prospect is, what your business is. But I think the standards these days are pretty obvious. You need a website. Doesn't, again, need to be that complex. And by the way, there's some wonderful off-the-shelf website kind of blueprint packages out there. I built my websites on Weebly, W-E-E-B-L-Y, so you don't have to spend a lot of money to develop sites anymore, and your presence can be through Twitter as well, Facebook. I think it really depends on how your customer interacts with you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hope that helped, Abby. All right, so we're going to go to number 5, determine pricing strategy and rules. Research the market to understand the laws of gravity. What are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about make sure that you talk to the marketplace and you don't just throw a dart at the dartboard saying, yeah, I think I want to charge X for it because that's a nice number that fits in cell 42L on my spreadsheet of my business plan. Pricing doesn't work that way. Get some power buyers. Bullet point number 2. Influencers who will tell you the truth and help you. Maybe even establish an advisory committee. So you're out there selling, right? And there's going to be some people who are going to be like, oh my gosh, this is great. Well, those are people that you may want to help counsel you to help design what your product looks like, what your pricing looks like. I'm not saying it needs to be more than 4 or 5 people, but it's always nice to get that kind of feedback from the street. Third bullet point here, decide pricing strategy. Are you going to go low first and then upsell? Is that the type of product and service you're in? But also maybe asking the question, what do you think it's worth? It's okay sometimes to ask buyers that at the start because they're going to tell you. If they don't know, then you're back to trying to figure out what the market can bear and looking at competitive forces, etc. Also, who gets to decide on pricing? I think it's a little dangerous that it's only the CEO. I think he should have some help in an organization, especially at the start. If there's a finance team, engage the finance folks to constantly assess the market. So as you keep going, every quarter, make sure you keep your eye on, like, are we selling a lot and the way we're selling it is kind of easy. So that could mean that you're not priced high enough. I always marveled at the salesperson that would come back who would sell so fast, and I'd say, why are you selling so fast? I say, hey, whoa, hey, look at me, I'm so good. I'm like, I don't think we're charging enough. Okay? Resist the temptation to charge what your board thinks you should charge. And I think that's a real, real struggle these days, because many of you are raising money or have raised money based on a business plan, based on some assumptions. You have to back into those numbers, and sometimes that's scary because the numbers don't always work. Get it, been there, feel the pain, but what I'm suggesting is that you really got to keep an open mind about pricing and have some sort of a democratic process in your organization. We could go on this one for a while, and we could for a lot of these, but I'll pause here to see if there's any questions, because sometimes this is a charged issue, but for the most part, these are broad strokes for you.
I think I'm here, I think you've touched on it just from my perspective, especially for early stage companies. There will be some trial and error in terms of the pricing structure on, maybe I priced it too high or maybe I priced it too low, but that's what your first few customers, sometimes you'll get the benefit of, charging them not enough just to get people on the platform, but then really ironing out what the right pricing structure will be moving forward.
Yeah, and it's okay to raise prices, because you're just going to have an honest conversation with your prospect and your client and say, you know what, we weren't charging enough. But for you, we're not going to take you up as much as the price we're charging others. We'll take you up, and you make up a medium kind of happy zone for them. So you just have to be honest with your customers. Okay.
We have a question here from Tracy on that last point.
Okay.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on what you mean about resisting temptation to charge what your board thinks you should charge?
Yeah, sure. I've raised money before. I've started businesses, and everything's, happy, joy when you're there with the board and you get your check, and they think you're going to hit your numbers by the first milestone and the second milestone and everything, and then all of a sudden you go back into the wild and you find out that the buyers aren't paying you what you had marked up as your assumptions when you were writing your business plan, which also does suggest that your business plan phase needs to be a little bit more, have some due diligence to it. But assuming that you're beyond that, I just think you have to have honest conversations with the board that up front, so you don't get into a position where you have to deliver bad news 12, 18 months down the line when you had the number of customers that you told them you'd have, but they're only paying, let's say, 50% of what you thought you could charge. So I'm referring here to just having that honest conversation with the board up front and saying, this is the data we think supports why we're going to charge X, but the market's always going to dictate what we can charge, and we're going to do our best to address that. So.
Right.
More or less. That's
right.
How to think about it.
So, sorry, just as a sort of follow-on question from Tracy, you're recommending then, instead of trying to appease your board per se, you need to take a little bit more of a conservative approach, maybe with pricing, start a little bit lower, and then see what the market will bear. Is that tend to be
I think so, but without knowing the specific situation, because we're still dealing in generalities here.
Of course.
It's hard to say for sure, but the point here though is, don't let the board say to you, oh, we think it's definitely $1. You should charge $1 when you know that the market is only paying 50 cents. That's part of it too.
Right.
Really to say, wait, hold on, that's not what we're seeing out there, and if they come and say, well, you got to charge $1, say, well, we have to build momentum. And building momentum means you have to establish value, and establishing value is sometimes an arduous, path down the road.
Right. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Tracy. All right. So in conclusion here, these 5 things, just to stare at them here: creating a compelling GP, prioritizing and assigning accounts, getting to know your obstacles, knowing how to deal with them, your process for your sales process and how you're going to activate the market, and then just your pricing. All right, so let's motor. Core 6, this is where I can stretch my legs a little bit and talk to you about my business. This is the name of my company, and it's founded on the principles that you're seeing ahead of you here, which is all these fine, important things that I use as the lens against how to judge the health of a business and or the path of a business. So, you know, when you really break these down, you're talking about executive collaboration means creating an engagement and cross-function for all key leaders, and that takes work because that's communication. Implementing cooperation and support for sales function across departments. It can't be sales is expected to carry the weight and people aren't going to support them and vice versa. It has to be integrated. Develop communication and sharing platforms and protocol. When you're talking about culture, I touched on it earlier, which is culture is not just, you know, putting a foosball table in the back room and saying, okay, let's go have a beer, it's Friday at 4. You know, developing a real ethos which drives and motivates everybody in sales, things that you can point to, that you stand for, and communicating those cultural values and creating programs which reinforce those principles. I had one at a company I ran where I had 100 people, 100 salespeople. It was the cultural ethos was think, be human, and persevere. They're pretty generic, but reps would come back to me and they'd say, you'd be proud of me, boss. I was a real human on that sales call. And what I was just saying was, like, nobody wants to be sold to. Just be a consultant, be a friend, be an advisor of the buyer. And let them see your humanity. People will buy when you show them your humanity. So there's a lot to culture, management and leadership, learning how to inspire and motivate, aligning people and resources, designing the company and product vision, operations and execution, building a scalable process, creating accountability and measurement tools. Number 3, maximizing communication to ensure the wide adoption of systems. Offering strategy. Number 5 here is our total core 6. Crafting a commercially appealing value proposition and creating compelling sales materials like your general presentation, right? Synthesizing your market data and converting into product service features. What is the market saying, and what does that mean on how you need to talk back to the market and frame the value of your service? And number 3, observing your competition eventually. And then finally, recruiting and training. It should be number 1. It's one of the more important things to scale a business. Obviously, early growth financial services is going to help you in that corner of the world with a very vital core element of financial management, so that's key. But when it comes to building a sales team, you got to build a scalable recruiting process. You got to have a good onboarding program so that reps can get up to speed fast, and you got to develop an ongoing training program. This is what governs my work. It's what governs whether I do executive coaching, sales training, business advisement, and I find that this covers everything that really needs to be thought about from a macro perspective regarding an entire company, but also regarding individuals. And I want to bookmark the core 6 there for a second and talk a little bit about evolution of sales leadership, because of course we're going to dream and we're going to talk about, and by the way, we've entered the, as you can see in the top right corner, it says soon. This is tomorrow. This is the second phase of our kind of agenda here. So we did the top 5 things, and now we're talking about tomorrow. Now we're talking about allow yourself to dream. This is when you start to scale. This is when you start to like grow, and it's fun, and you're selling things. Well, first of all, you're probably in the stage somewhere around number 1 where the CEO is your acting head of sales. Maybe you have a dedicated sales leader. Maybe you call him the national sales manager. Maybe he or she is not qualified to be carrying that title, but you still have that title assigned to them. And then let's call your first draft pick, your first big hire as a national sales director, someone who's coming from really outside of the organization that you have to recruit in. Nirvana is when you can hire a VP of sales, and then you're killing it when you get a chief revenue officer, because it probably means you got multiple revenue streams. From a trait standpoint, from a qualification standpoint, well, we know the CEO is the big cheese, aka numero uno, etc. Your first dedicated head is probably this person who's got some good, strong traits. They lack some refined skills. They probably blush when I talk to them about Core 6 because they wouldn't understand all those concepts. Only when you get into number 3, when you're talking about a manager who is, or sorry, your national sales director, who's basically the manager plus refined skills, right? That's when you're starting to get somebody who's cognizant about some of these core 6 values and principles. Number 4, your VP of sales, well, he's a director. He or she is a director. He or she is a VP of sales with director experience. And then CRO is basically a VP of sales plus the gravitas of somebody who can really command a room, make speeches, sit on panels, etc. Listen, it's good to dream. It's good to see what it looks like. But I just want to throw that out there and then real quickly lay it against the 6 core principles and just lay it horizontally on the top here, CEO, National Sales Manager / National Sales Director, and an SVP. And I wanted to just show this to you to give you a roadmap on how you need to think about where core skills may sit. This is not a pure science, but when you're talking about a CEO, he's probably going to get 5 out of 5 stars on knowing how to activate culture. He's got the vision, he or she's got the knowledge on driving, kind of what the vision is, what the mission is. They're probably really good at executive collab, very strong as a manager and a leader. They've probably done a few startups, run a few companies before. Starts to get a little thin on offering strategy. They're not the best at that because that's not what they're hired to do. Same on operations and execution. No, sometimes CEOs come from being COOs. Okay, so don't take this totally verbatim because there's a point to this that I'm getting to. Recruiting and training, they're good. They probably think they're better than they are because it's their vision, but sometimes they don't know how to package it. They don't know how to kind of frame it as a way to really kind of excite, the salesperson or a top head of sales. What about over on the national sales manager side of things? It's a different skill set. They're not as good at that level at culture activation, but they really start to show their worth down around offering strategy because they're living on the street. They know what the street says. They're able to come back and say, we need to make red umbrellas. People are buying red umbrellas. They're probably a little better on operations and execution, probably pretty good at recruiting and training. And then when you get up to the SVP level, again, to daydream, this is fun because the CEO can go back to doing CEO things because an SVP of sales should be strong in all of these core 6 areas. Not always, but should be. And what I call the sweet spot of scale is when you are at that point in your business where you can hire the national sales manager or director and you can handle the SVP of sales because you're scaling so quickly and so well from a margin standpoint that you can hire those folks. That's all I really wanted to offer there with that, is just to think about that as a backdrop. The realities of scale, and yes, Erica? Yeah.
We just have a couple of questions which I'm kind of trying to synthesize into one, but it's around hiring. So, we have questions about sort of, at what point should you hire your first salesperson? And then, when your company's really small, like, a team of less than 10, when would you want to hire a sales director maybe, or, someone to sort of head up sales? And also has that link with marketing? Would you want to hire sales before marketing? Or so kind of a lot of questions around when. When do you need these people?
Well, I'm completely biased. I like to eat before I starve, so I always want to hire salespeople before marketing people. But I'm very fond of people like Erica, so no, you got to take care of revenue first. You've got to hire sales first. When to hire your first outside salesperson? As soon as you can afford it. When to hire your first national sales manager, director? As soon as you can afford it. When to hire your first SVP of sales? As soon as you can afford it. Because look at what they're going to do here. They're going to take pressure away from the CEO, because you don't want the CEO to have to do all of these things. The CEO should not be focusing on all 6 of these things. They've got to let other people do it. So then it begs the question, well, how do you know if you can afford it? Well, you've got to figure out, what does your sales pipeline look like? What is the cost of hiring in your market, in your category, for your business? And then put pencil to paper.
Yeah. And I mean,
did I miss one of those?
No, I think that's good. Just sort of a related question here is there's so many sales specialties, as it were, people who specialize in different areas of sales. And so there's questions here about, how, like, if you have the money to hire some salesperson, who should that be? Should it be someone who's great at leveraging social media? Should it be an inside salesperson? Is there something you recommend for those first hires when you just have enough maybe to hire one person to start taking the burden off the CEO?
I'm going to give you all an incredible secret. I want everybody to pick up a pen or pencil right now. Get out your get a piece of paper right next to. Come on. You call it number 42. I mean you. Okay. All right. Okay. Here's the key. Here's what you hire. You hire ambition. That's it. You've got to your first hire. Forget about what a great question, Erica. By the way, thank you to you and or whoever asked it. You can't worry about core competencies of do they know everything about your category? Do they know everything about your social media? Do they have relationships built in? You have to buy perseverance. That has to be the trait. Because if you hire perseverance, if you hire ambition, then they will figure out your category, your product, your customer base, how to price. They'll figure it out. But if you don't hire for that, and if you get sucked up reading all these HBR articles, which by the way I love Harvard Business Review, but if you get sucked up reading all these articles about, well, the candidate needs to have these 7 skills, yeah, they should, but if they don't have persistence, perseverance, get up and go, ambition, whatever word you want to use, if they don't have that, I don't care about everything else.
Gotcha.
My favorite. I hired this one woman in New York because she said, look, I don't know your industry, I don't know your business, I want to work for you. As an aside, she wanted to work for me personally because she heard good things about me, which was very flattering. But she said this one thing, and she had the job the minute she said it. She said, I will pick through a brick wall with a plastic spoon to get the order for you. Done. I'm done. You're hired. Somebody says that to me, they're hired because something magical happens when that person says it. They're now obligated to do it. Right?
Yep.
Turned out to be one of my best salespersons. Okay. Can we move?
Yes, move on. Thank you.
We're almost done.
Yeah.
But the questions tell me that we're hitting nerves here, so it's good. Mm-hmm. So realities of scaling, Core 6 focus, we went over that, plus a macro process. I've talked a lot about process. I want to talk about specific things, and this is going to wrap it up, and it'll take about 2 minutes. So thanks for everybody staying with us here. There's 3 core things that I think are incredibly important as describing the process of having an evolved sales approach. You have to have this thing called mastery of the sales call. You have to have some sort of a performance review process, okay, known as my particular one is called PAM12, Performance Achievement Method, right? If you're an advisor, you brand all this crap, right? Okay, you need a strategic account management system, and of course, I took the easy way out, and I'm just calling it SAMS. So what are these things? These are governing foundations once you build a sales force that have to be implemented. And because this is probably advanced versus where a bunch of you are, I've only dedicated 1 slide to it, but I want to show you what it is. So when we're talking about MSC, mastery of a sales call, we're talking about making sure everybody on your team knows how to run a face-to-face sales meeting, which means they know how to prepare, they know how to set an agenda and work towards it, they're strong in their presentation skills, they're strong in their qualifying skills, they know how to handle obstacles, and they know how to close and negotiate, and they certainly know how to upsell. Performance Achievement Method 12. It's basically a review process of 12 criteria that I lay against SEs, sales executives, to make sure that they are achieving and I can chart their progress. It's a time-based skill measurement process every quarter. Well, for example, look over to your left, presentation skills. We knew that we had to work on your presentation skills, Gadiel. What have you done in the past 90 days to get better? And let's talk about how you've gotten better. So it's a number 2, it's a formal quarterly review, and it should be correlated to compensation. And it can be benchmarked against your entire team. Very strong. Again, sophisticated stuff, but wanted to share it. SAMS, Strategic Account Management System, an account review process to ensure that you're working each top account in the company. Again, it's time-based. Every quarter you're going to sit down. How did you move the needle forward, Gadiel, on such and such account? By the way, Gadiel, you're doing great as my role play partner here. You're not pushing back too much, and I love it. Thank you. Formal quarterly reviews, creating priorities and team collaboration. Okay, so that's what we mean here with the realities of scale. So again, let's wrap it up here. I just want to drop that on your heads a little bit. It's hopefully a place where you'll all be really soon, and it's a good place to be. So do these things today. Get your GP done. Prioritize your accounts. Understand your obstacles. Develop your sales process and your pipeline management tools, and agree on your pricing. And then hopefully success will come, and you're going to be hiring that head of sales role. It's a key person. So invest in the resources, the time, the labor, an outside firm, whatever you have to do. Make that hire the right hire. Number 2, understand the core 6 principles, how it applies to your business. Of course, I'm happy to talk to anyone with you about that further. And then number 3, create and perfect your approach and your systems. Your selling approach, mastery of the sales call, your performance management, PAM 12, your strategic account management, and again, I'm referring to those are the tools of my trade. Those are the products that I sell. When you're ready for them, I'll obviously be there. That's it. Listen, everyone, cheers for you. You're the entrepreneurs that are driving our world and fueling the growth. It takes time to build the revenue and scale. Don't get frustrated. Just keep positive and keep putting one foot in front of the next. Number 2, never, ever get uninvolved in the sales. When I say here stay involved, it's stay involved in sales. Just because you're delegating to an SVP of sales or a head of national sales doesn't mean that you can detach as the COO or CEO or founder, or whatever you are, whoever I'm talking to right now. Never detach from sales process. You detach from sales, you lose the pulse of where your company's going. And finally, friends like Early Growth Financial and of course, Core 6 are here to help, and we know how to help. So I am what am I doing here? We're 57 past the hour, but you asked a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, we're good. We have one final question. I think we have time for one final question, then we'll just kind of wrap it up here. So it's kind of a specific question, but an interesting one and a long one. So hold on. It is, Kelly wants to know, is it a myth that you don't need to hire your own salespeople if you have agreements with several large OEM distributors, each with their own established dealer network? And as an add-on to that, are there any proven strategies for motivating distributors to push the sales of your products?
Okay, so repeat the first one, the first part, so I can focus on that one.
Sure. So is it true or is it a myth that you don't need to hire your own salespeople if you have agreements with several large OEM distributors, each with their own established dealer network?
Okay, so the answer there is only you can answer that if you feel that you are leaving margin or upselling opportunities on the table. So in other words, I've never been a firm believer that things get bought automatically. Salespeople exist to extract maximum value from relationships. So with that question that you're asking, I think you have to go back and you have to perhaps go examine your business and say, am I extracting the most amount of value with this current structure in place, or could I extract more value if I insert human beings into it? Whether you call them sales, whether you call them biz dev, whether you call them account developers, that's entirely up to you, but ultimately their task is going to be to extract more value. That's my answer to that. The second part, Erica?
Second part, I think you sort of answered it, but maybe to elaborate, are there any proven strategies for motivating your distributors to push sales of your products? I think it's the same answer.
Gosh, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, take them to play golf, take them to dinner, take them to Jamaica. No, listen, the same thing. Invest in the relationship. Sales is relationship. Like right now, it is killing me that I can't see any of you, but obviously we're taking advantage of a form of technology that gives us this benefit. But invest in the relationship, and you'll see what you have to do in terms of how many salespeople to hire, how many biz dev folks, whatever you call it. So yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. So I'm going to wrap up here, and Michael, if you wouldn't mind just going to the last slide so we can pull up your contact information.
Oh my gosh, yes, of course.
There you go. Okay, perfect.
I'm based in New York. Based in New York, and of course based everywhere. And same with Gadiel, and same with Erica, right?
Yep. Well, we're here in San Francisco, but we're everywhere, yes. So, a number of you have asked during this presentation whether you will get a copy of this. So in case you didn't ask but you were wondering, yes, we're going to send out a follow-up email tomorrow, and we'll have a link to this deck as well as a link to the recording, so you'll be able to review that. And if you have any outstanding questions, you see Michael and Gadiel's contact information here, so feel free to follow up. Just a quick plug for our next webinar on April 29th with Delia Ghosh, who's a partner at Berry, Appleman & Layden, and it's on immigration challenges for startups and emerging businesses. So it's a very interesting topic, and she will help navigate that process of immigration. If you want to sign up for that or any of our other upcoming webinars, just go to our website and check out our events page. Again, thank you so much to Gadiel, and thank you, Michael, for this wonderful presentation. We really appreciate you taking the time and appreciate all of you who've listened in and hope you learned something valuable today. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.